Men facing a string of charges in connection with the shooting that happened right downtown, followed by a crash in Etobicoke. Ford government calling on Ottawa to tighten bail legislation. And Swifties, listen up. TTC has announced service changes to accommodate Taylor Swift fans later this month. We'll tell you all about that just ahead. This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Phil Perkins. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Live at 5. Our top story. A man is facing charges in a downtown shooting and a crash in Etobicoke a short time later. CP24's Melissa Duggan joins us live with the details on this. Yeah, let's walk through this. The timeline seems pretty wild.
It really does. So there was a carjacking, there was a shooting, there was a car crash. And as you mentioned, they're stretching from Moss Park all the way to Etobicoke. Police describing this as a car rental agreement gone wrong. So it all started in Moss Park at Dundas East and Sherbourne around 9:30 last night. So here's the deal. There was a victim who had this rental car, rented it out to someone, but hadn't received the last month's rent. So decided to get a couple of friends. They located the vehicle. This victim contacted the person who originally rented the vehicle and arranged for them to bring the keys to the vehicle. Well, that's when things kind of went sideways here. The victim and two friends were standing near the vehicle when the lone male suspect approached them. The victim told the suspect they could not take the vehicle. That's when the suspect entered the victim's vehicle, pulled out a handgun, and then the suspect discharged 6 rounds from that handgun. A friend of this person who rented the vehicle was struck twice by gunfire, shot twice, rushed to hospital with serious injuries. And then the suspect fled that scene in the victim's vehicle. A short time later, the suspect lost control of the vehicle, crashed near Kipling Avenue and the Westway, actually hitting a school. Then there was a vehicle fire. The suspect then taking off on foot, police chasing after him a short time later, making that arrest. They also recovered a handgun during that arrest. Arrested was Jacare Heavens, 19 years old. He was charged with 8 charges in all, including robbery with a firearm, unauthorized possession of a firearm, theft of a motor vehicle involving violence. This suspect also taken to hospital just as a precaution, though. As for the person who was shot, again, rushed to hospital with serious injuries, but their condition, Phil, considered not to be life-threatening. So, yes, a series of dramatic events all taking place overnight, but ending with a 19-year-old charge facing 8 charges and one person in hospital with those serious injuries. Back to you.
All right, Melissa Duggan, thank you very much for mapping that out. Let's go to Queen's Park. Right now, the Ford government is calling on Ottawa to amend the criminal code to tighten bail legislation. The province is recommending several changes, including restoring mandatory minimum sentences for serious crimes and the removal of bail availability for those charged with murder, terrorism, human trafficking, and other offenses. It also wants a so-called 3-strike rule that would require pre-trial detention for repeat offenders. The province says that the reforms are needed to protect public safety.
We will never apologize for advocating for the strongest bail reform and the strongest message that there must be serious consequences for repeat offenders. And we'll never apologize for putting our public safety first. Ontarians are looking to us to be creative and innovative when it comes to fighting crime.
We don't tell judges what to do after we appoint them. The federal criminal code does. And when you look at the bail system as it's working, frankly, it's working exactly how it was intended to do. When the Liberals brought in Bill C-75 back in 2019, they wanted maximum leniency and the least restrictive forms of bail. That's exactly what we're seeing in our neighborhoods now. What we're calling on them to do is implement these changes. They've asked us to be more prescriptive. We've been more prescriptive with the letter that we've sent this morning. We think these changes will help keep Ontario communities safe.
For reaction now, let's go outside Queen's Park right now. CP24's Beatrice Vaisman. So what are people saying about this?
This has become an incredibly political issue, Phil. I mean, we heard from Peel Regional Police and the deputy police chief today saying that 50%, almost 50% of every person they arrest for violent crimes is out on some form of release or bail. And so police chiefs and deputies have been talking about this for a while. The Ford government and the Premier himself have been talking about this for a while. And now we're getting a response as well from the federal justice minister, who says that the Premier and the province is playing political gamesmanship with this issue. Here's more from the Justice Minister.
It's very concerning when I've expressed a lot of concerns to my provincial colleagues, and those concerns have been reiterated. They've been reiterated from people such as the Ontario Crown Attorneys Association, who have said that court resources and court staffing is a big problem in terms of addressing bail. It's a problem when I also hear from police officers, such as the Deputy Chief of York Police, who say that the conditions in courts are so crowded that there are not enough crowns to contest bail hearings. When I hear from the National Police Federation, who tell me that it's kind of fascinating that you're having such decisions rendered by adjudicators in Ontario, and those adjudicators are not legally trained.
Minister Arif Farhani also, Phil, saying that he's invited the Associate Minister for Bail Reform to the table to talk about ways to reform the bail system. Though the Canadian Civil Liberties Association today simply saying that what the province is proposing contradicts people's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Some criminal defense lawyers actually saying it violates human rights because being charged is not the same thing as being convicted, and one is innocent until proven guilty. Meantime, as I mentioned, police chiefs and police officials right across the GTHA have been talking about their concerns about the catch and release program, whereby police arrest someone for a violent crime. That person is granted bail, is back out on the street, and while they're waiting for a court date for their initial charge, they go out and reoffend once again. And so Chief Myron Demkew has been part of the campaign pushing for reforms as part of bail legislation. And this afternoon, I had a chance to ask the Deputy Chief of Toronto Police what she makes of what the province is asking for and whether it would make a difference when it comes to policing here at the City of Toronto. So here's more from Deputy Police Chief Lauren Pogue.
Our Chief, Myron Demkew, has spoken many times about the advocacy that we're doing around legislative reform, and that is being done across the policing sector, right across the country with all of our partners. Certainly, I think these reforms are long overdue, and we see the impact of people reoffending and how that affects the safety of our city. So again, we've spoken many times, and we continue to work with our policing partners, with a number of agencies and all levels of government, again, to lobby for this change.
The chair of the Peel Regional Police Services Board taking it a step further, saying this like police officers in that region are pushing the same boulder over and over again, confronting the same people over and over again. Meantime, the Justice Minister, Phil, saying he needs to see more data before any changes are made, and he's calling on the provincial government to take care of courts, to reduce the backlog, to take care of crowns, hire more crown attorneys, and make sure that conditions in jail are actually up to snuff as well, Phil.
Tris, thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, it is 5:08 right now. 6 degrees. Take a look at traffic. Here's Adrian Yabo. How things looking?
They're pretty busy, but you know what, all things considered, Phil, not so bad. We do have one issue, though, if you're heading into Vaughan, to be aware of. It's on the northbound lanes of the 400. This is just as you make your way through Langstaff in the Express. It is the right lane and shoulder blocked at this stall, so it's slow into Vaughan at this time of day, but just be aware of that slow spot because of this issue. On to the 401 eastbound, still pretty busy in the collectors from past Dixie all the way to past the Don Valley Parkway. This is where this right lane has been out since the morning following some emergency road work. And no emergency road work on the DVP. It's actually starting to thin out, not as bad as it was before. Delays now from north of Bayview Bloor, and they continue as you travel up towards the 401. Outside of camera view, crews on scene of a collision blocking lanes on Jane right at Annette. I'll send it back to you.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
All right, thank you, Adjo. Speaking of traffic, TTC increasing service to accommodate Taylor Swift's tour stop here in Toronto. The TTC says when Swift's Eras Tour arrives, there'll be more trains running on Line 1 from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. prior to the show, and then from 11 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. afterwards. There will also be additional streetcars and buses running in the downtown core, as well as supervisors, special constables, and other first responders. Swift's first show is at Rogers Centre, November 14th. Well, police say a man shot near Yonge and Sheppard last week died in hospital over the weekend. 31-year-old Devin Brumble from Toronto was shot in an underground parking garage at Bogart Avenue around noon on Thursday. Police say any information about the suspect or the motive for the shooting is still outstanding. And a man is facing charges after a Durham police helicopter was repeatedly struck by a green laser in Oshawa on Friday night. Police sharing footage from inside the cockpit of Air One showing a powerful green laser being pointed at the chopper several times. Officers on the ground were eventually able to track down the suspects in the area of Thornton and Rossland Roads. 27-year-old Arsh Sharma facing several charges, including 2 counts of mischief, endangering life. And new home sales in GTA remained sluggish last month despite lower interest rates. There were 591 new home sales in the region in September, that according to Building Industry and Land Development Association. It is a 69% drop from a year ago. 247 condos were sold during the same period, which is down 81% from last year. The report notes that the benchmark prices for all new homes also dipped slightly last month. And with that, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to remove GST on new homes sold for under $1 million if elected. He made the announcement in Ottawa this morning.
This will save about $40,000 on a new home of $800,000. That would mean a savings every year of $2,200 in mortgage payments. Getting rid of the GST on new home builds will stimulate 30,000 additional homes built every single year, which incidentally will actually generate more income tax revenue for the government without raising rates. That will help cover the cost of the tax cut.
Poilievre says that his government will also push provinces to remove sales taxes on new homes, resulting in thousands of dollars in additional savings for Canadian homebuyers. It is 5:11, 6 degrees outside. You're watching Live at 5. A multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit alleging that black public servants have endured decades of systemic racism and discrimination is now being heard in a Toronto court. More on that coming up. Welcome back. Israeli parliament has passed multiple bills targeting the UN agency responsible for distributing aid in Gaza from operating within Israel. The first bill makes it illegal for UNRWA to operate within Israel. The second restricts the agency from providing aid to Gaza and designate it as a terror group. Israel has alleged some of UNRWA's thousands of staff members participated in the October 7th Hamas attack that sparked the current war. UNRWA's chief says the bills will only deepen the suffering of Palestinians, especially in Gaza. Let's go stateside. The U.S. election is now just over a week away, and both candidates are pulling out all the stops to win over voters. Republican hopeful Donald Trump will be in Atlanta tonight after a rally at New York's Madison Square Garden last night. It was a raucous event, overshadowed by some crude and racist remarks by some of his supporters.
Under Kamala, America is a sanctuary for criminals and for illegal aliens that are in our country illegally. I will immediately ban all sanctuary cities in the United States.
Former U.S. president promising to ban sanctuary cities was just one of his campaign pitches that night. The event also featured a rare campaign appearance by his wife Melania, as well as House Speaker Mike Johnson and wrestling legend Hulk Hogan. And a comedian is facing some criticism for a joke that he made during the event.
There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
There's been some major backlash to those comments from comedian Tony Hinchcliffe. Puerto Rican rapper Bad Bunny, one of the most popular stars of Latin music, announced his support for Kamala Harris after that rally at MSG. And with that Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris is in the battleground state of Michigan today. She visited a semiconductor factory to emphasize how government funding for computer chip manufacturers could create factory jobs.
Joseph Biden now voting. Take a moment to put that away.
U.S. President Joe Biden was in Wilmington, Delaware today to cast his ballot at an advanced polling station in his home state. Biden stepped aside in the race for the White House back in July and endorsed his current vice president for the top job. Back here, a multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit alleging that black public servants have endured decades of systemic racism and discrimination being heard in a Toronto court. Black government workers are claiming $2.5 billion in lost salaries and pensions because of anti-black racism in hiring and promotion practices. The class action lawsuit would cover around 45,000 black government workers and job applicants, as the alleged discrimination occurred across dozens of federal departments and agencies dating back to 1970. The certification hearing could last up to 12 days and will determine whether the lawsuit can go ahead.
We didn't have to be here today. Canada could have consented to certifying or agreeing for this class action to move to the next step, which is not an admission of guilt. Canada has refused to do that. Instead, it wants to litigate this class action all the way. It has spent over $10 million fighting black workers in court, more than it has spent in terms of providing solutions to this.
I used to work at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. When I first started at the commission, I had high hopes. I thought that I had found my forever home in terms of my employer. I am a human rights activist at heart. I care about humans, and I thought that I would be able to fight for the rights of humans within that institution. When I started, I found out that there was a lot of violent practices inside of the commission towards their employees, but also that the same practices were discriminatory towards people that would file complaints at the commission, and usually their complaints would be turned down because of the color of their skin.
A statement from the Treasury Board reads in part, quote, "To date, we have announced our work to establish the first ever restorative engagement program for public service through recommendations of a panel of experts and announced the action plan for black public servants. We've also launched the action plan for black public servants to improve support available to black employees. We're taking steps to address all forms of racism and discrimination which have taken root over generations, and our efforts will continue to evolve as we listen, learn, and adapt to the needs of our diverse workforce." And we're getting closer to learning who actually won last week's election in British Columbia. Tens of thousands of mail-in and absentee ballots are being counted, with election officials expecting the count to continue today. There are also recounts in several ridings that are too close to call. Earlier today, the NDP was leading in 47 ridings. Conservatives were at 45, the Green Party at 2. 47 seats are needed for a majority.
Our PC government is the only party, it's the only one that can make it happen for Nova Scotians.
Meanwhile, Nova Scotians will soon head to the polls after a snap election was called. Gunning for a second term, Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston made the call, which has been criticized by the NDP, Liberals, and Green Party. Houston had personally introduced legislation a few years ago, setting the fixed election date for next July. Election day is now set for November 26. Follow to a story brought to you last week. Quarter pounders back on McDonald's menus across the U.S. after testing ruled out beef patties as the source of a large E. coli outbreak. McDonald's notes that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration continues to believe that slivered onions from a single supplier are likely the source of the contamination. As of Friday, the outbreak had expanded to at least 75 people sick in 13 states with one death. The affected products were only sold in specific states and never part of McDonald's Canada's food supply. Sticking with food, candy recall has been issued just days before Halloween. The affected candies are from the brand Haribo and are labeled Tang Fastics due to pieces of wood. So wood was found in these things. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the gummy candies have a best before date of June 25th, 2025. It is 5:20. Feels like 4 outside. You're watching Live at 5. The latest report on food banks highlights a grim new milestone. More on that coming up. Welcome back. The number of people who rely on food banks in this country has hit a grim new milestone. According to a new Food Banks Canada report, there were more than 2 million visits to food banks last March, nearly double the number of visits in March of 2019. That's also 6% higher than last year's record-breaking number. The organization says rapid inflation, housing costs, and insufficient social supports are driving poverty and food insecurity.
The network itself is buckling under the strain of this very rapid increase in need in such a short period of time. So the system isn't designed to handle, I don't think any system is designed to handle almost doubling of increase within such a short period of time. So food banks do their best in order to make sure everyone gets something, and they do their best to manage these reductions in supply, but running out of food happens inevitably. Also, what they've had to do is reduce the amount of food or the frequency of visits that food bank people who are coming to food banks can come.
And Daily Bread Food Bank CEO Neil Hetherington spoke to CP24 about these concerning findings.
It tells you that we have a broken social safety net. It tells you that there is something fundamentally wrong. It tells you that we are not building affordable housing. It tells you that the income supports that we have for those on disability are inadequate. And it tells you that there is a rising use of precarious employment. All of that is on the shoulders of the most vulnerable. All of that are on those children, the 2 in 5, and across the country, 1 in 3 being children who are having to make use of food banks is deplorable and not who we are as a nation.
On top of that, nearly a third of Canadian food banks report that they're running out of food. It is 5:24. Feels like for you watching Live at 5. The Leafs looking to snap a 3-game losing streak against the undefeated Winnipeg Jets. Gonna be tough. We'll give you a preview. Toronto Maple Leafs on the road in Winnipeg tonight, looking to snap their 3-game losing streak against the Red Hot Jets.
Pasternak in front, Stolarz, another stop, scores!
That was the scene over the weekend. The Leafs coming out of that 4-3 overtime loss in Boston on Saturday. The Jets, meanwhile, are looking to set a new franchise record with their 9th straight win. Puck drop at 7:30. And the Leafs have signed defenseman Jake McCabe to a 5-year contract extension at just over $4.5 million a season. The 31-year-old has been a mainstay on the Leafs blue line since being acquired from the Blackhawks during the 2023 season, putting up 36 points over 103 games. Meanwhile, Scotiabank, the Raptors likely to be shorthanded once again as they welcome in the Denver Nuggets tonight. Emmanuel Quickly doubtful. RJ Barrett questionable for the game as both recover from injuries. Toronto coming off that 112-101 loss to the Timberwolves on Saturday. That saw Grady Dick lead the team in scoring with 25 points. Tip-off also at 7:30. It's a packed night of sports. World Series now shifts to New York tonight as the Yankees are trailing the Dodgers 2-0 in this series. Freddie Freeman, Canadian parents, hit his second home run of the World Series Saturday night to help the Dodgers to a 4-2 victory. Shohei Ohtani injured his shoulder sliding into second base late in the game, but the team expects him to be in the lineup tonight. First pitch flies at 8:08. It's 5:28, 8 degrees. Watching Live at 5, the Ford government calling on Ottawa to tighten bail legislation. We'll get reaction to that coming up. Man is facing a string of charges in connection with a shooting that happened downtown and ended with a crash in Etobicoke. And the Ford government calling on Ottawa to tighten bail legislation. We'll get reaction to that. And the TTC announcing some service changes to accommodate Taylor Swift fans later this month. We'll tell you all about that just ahead. This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Phil Perkins. You're watching Live at 5. Thanks for joining us. Well, Amanda's facing charges in a downtown shooting and later a crash on the other side of the city a short time later. CP24's Melissa Duggan joins us live with the details. And there's a lot of details with this one, Melissa.
Yeah, exactly, Phil. So a man is in hospital with serious injuries, a 19-year-old man facing 8 charges after his arrest, all following a carjacking, a shooting, a car crash that started in Moss Park, ended in Etobicoke. It all began about 9:30 last night in the area of Dundas East and Sherbourne. Police are calling this as basically a car rental agreement gone wrong. So this person being described as a victim here rented a car to someone. When they didn't get last month's payment, they wanted to collect it. So what happened? This person who rented the vehicle got a couple of friends, reached out to this person who rented the vehicle and said, hey, we want the keys back. We want this vehicle back. So they went to go meet this person at the vehicle. That is when this victim who rented the vehicle and two friends were approached by a lone male suspect. The victim told the suspect that they couldn't take the vehicle. The suspect then entered the victim's vehicle, brought out a handgun, and then fired 6 shots. 2 of those shots striking the friend of this person who rented the vehicle. They were taken to hospital with serious injuries. And then that's when the next chapter of all of this begins. The suspect fled in the vehicle, and then a short time later in Etobicoke crashed that vehicle into a school in the area of Kipling Avenue and the Westway. There was a fire in this vehicle. The suspect fled that area on foot. Police then chased after this suspect, catching up with him and then making the arrest. The suspect, by the way, taken to hospital just as a precaution, but then the suspect facing 8 charges, including robbery with a firearm, aggravated assault, theft of a motor vehicle involving violence. That suspect due to appear in court earlier today. As for the person who was shot in this instance, Phil, again, they were rushed to hospital with serious injuries, but not considered life-threatening. So a real dramatic series of events that span from Moss Park to Etobicoke last night, but ending in this arrest. Back to you.
Melissa Duggan, thank you very much for breaking that down. Okay, let's go to Queen's Park right now. The Ford government is calling on Ottawa to amend the criminal code to tighten bail legislation. The province is recommending several changes, including restoring mandatory minimum sentences for serious crimes and the removal of bail availability for those charged with murder, terrorism, human trafficking, and other offenses. It also wants a so-called 3-strike rule that would require pretrial detention for repeat offenders. The province says the reforms are needed to protect public safety.
But you know what? When I speak to my constituents in York Centre, when their homes have been violated by somebody knocking down the door, there's only one place for the people that have done that, and that's in jail. And we've got space for them.
And we know there will be strong thoughts about it. This government, led by Premier Doug Ford, will not back down. We are not scared of standing up for victims. We are not scared of doing things that are hard. We are not scared of saying that dangerous criminals deserve to be behind bars.
For reaction, let's go live to CP24's Beatrice Vazen. So what are people saying about this proposal?
Proposal by the Ford government comes at a time when the government recognizes that there's a lot of people being victimized by auto thefts, by carjackings, by violent home invasions as well. And so they're pointing their finger at the federal government, saying the feds aren't doing enough to help curb crime because they say the feds refuse to make changes to bail legislation. The reverse is happening with the feds saying the Ford government isn't doing enough to hire more Crown attorneys, make sure that the court backlogs are dealt with, to make sure that conditions in jail are appropriate. And today, the Justice Minister says that the Ford government is playing political gamesmanship. Here's more from Justice Minister Arif Virani.
What we need to see, if you're an evidence-based government, I need to see evidence. We passed bail reform about 10 months ago in the chamber right behind me, working together with provinces, including Ontario. What we asked at that time and what I continue to ask today, and including in a letter I shared at the Federal Provincial Territorial Conference in Yellowknife 10 days ago, is that I need to see statistics about what's working and what is not. And what I absolutely need to see and what all Ontarians need to see is, do we have enough courtrooms? Do we have enough crowns? Are those crowns contesting bail hearings? Are they appealing ones that they feel aggrieved for? And are the detention spaces sufficient? And are the conditions humane? Those are key questions that I need to have answered before we start to act.
Minister Virani also adding, Phil, that he's not convinced that the 3-strike rule, whereby if someone reoffends 3 times that they essentially lose their ability to be granted bail, is actually going to do anything to curb serious criminal violence happening in cities across the country. He simply says if you look at the U.S., you'll see that that's not the case. Meantime, police chiefs and police deputies, along with some officials from Police Services Board, they've been talking about this for months now, saying that it's become really challenging for for police services to police municipalities when they're simply arresting the same people over and over and over again. In fact, we heard today from Peel's Deputy Police Chief Nick Milinovich that nearly 50% of everyone Peel Regional Police officers arrest for violent crimes in their communities are out on some kind of release or bail. Here's what we heard from the chair of the Peel Regional Police Services Board.
I used the analogy before, Sisyphus, that person in Greek mythology that had to roll the boulder up the hill and was condemned to seeing it roll down all the time. That's how police officers must feel at times. And you just hope the boulder doesn't run over and kill you next time around from the same person that you put aside last week or a month before. So on behalf of the officers, and I think the public feels this, and we have to have their backs, the fact that we don't want you going out there and going after the same people that you've brought to justice, and yet justice doesn't seem to be fulfilled, and now you've got to risk it all over again the next morning to go chase the same individuals.
Meantime, a criminal defense lawyer, Joseph Newberger, who we talked to earlier, Phil, says that what the government is proposing, what the provincial government is proposing, is simply draconian. In fact, he said it was insane. Meantime, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association is saying that this violates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for Canadians, possibly could violate human rights for being charged is not the same thing as being found guilty. And so one is innocent until proven guilty here in this country, Phil.
All right, Beatrice Faison, a lot of reaction to this topic, no doubt. Thank you. It's 5:37 right now, feels like 4. Adrian's here. Yabwa, how's traffic?
Yeah, it's pretty jammed, Phil. Just watching the drive on the westbound Gardner, it's always slow because of the long-term road work, but sunshine also playing a factor, blinding the drive. Make sure your shades are available. Slow exiting the downtown core this hour to get from Parliament to Dufferin, and then also seeing delays not involving sunshine, but because of the long-term road work from Parkside into the downtown core. Headed towards the DVP North, it's really, really busy. Actually getting busier now, approaching Bayview Bloor through to the 401, and if you're on the 401, thought I'd have better news. I do not. So eastbound on the 401 east of the DVP, still this right lane is out for this continued long-term road work. It's still very slow. Actually, it's improving, but still busiest from just past Dixie all the way out towards the scene. We also have a situation on City Streets, Phil, a collision involving a pedestrian still blocking a portion of Jane at Annette. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Adjo, thank you very much. Well, the TTC is increasing service to accommodate Taylor Swift's tour stop in Toronto. The TTC says that when Swift's Eras tour touches down, there will be more trains running on Line 1 from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. That is before the show. And then from 11 p.m. till 1:30 a.m. afterwards. There'll also be additional streetcars and buses running in the downtown core, as well as supervisors, special constables, and other first responders. Swift's first show is at Rogers Centre on November 14th. Well, police say a man shot near Yonge and Sheppard last week died in hospital over the weekend. 31-year-old Devin Brumbo from Toronto was shot in an underground parking garage on Bogart Avenue around noon on Thursday. Police say that information about the suspect or the motive behind the shooting is still outstanding at this time. And a man is facing charges after a Durham police helicopter was repeatedly struck by a green laser in Oshawa on Friday night. You see the footage here. Police sharing the video from inside the cockpit at Air 1, showing a powerful green laser being pointed at the chopper several times. Officers on the ground were eventually able to track down the suspects in the area of Thornton and Roseland Roads. In the end, 27-year-old Arsh Sharma is facing several charges, including 2 counts of mischief endangering life. It's 5:40, 8 degrees, feeling like 4. Watching Toronto's breaking news. Also live at 5, multiple names. The deadline set by a group of MPs to get the Prime Minister to step down has come and gone. More on this just ahead. Welcome back. Let's go to Ottawa right now. So far, no response from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after a group of Liberals set today as a deadline for their request that he step down. 24 MPs, most of them stayed anonymous, gave him until today to make up his mind. Trudeau has previously made it pretty clear that he isn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, the Trudeau government faces another deadline tomorrow. The Bloc Québécois has threatened to trigger an election if 2 pieces of legislation aren't passed. One would increase old age security payments and the other would bolster supply management. CTV political commentator Scott Reid joined CP24 this morning. He says Trudeau's seat will only get hotter moving forward regardless of what he says today.
with this much discontent, even within his own caucus. And that's what's triggering all of this. They're like, boss, we just don't think we can win with you. And we think you're actually a lightning rod for a lot of this disaffection and anger. So will he want to end his career by losing, and not just losing an election, but possibly losing in really catastrophic terms? And so that's the question that's going to persist. It isn't going to happen today at 5 p.m., according to a deadline, but it is the reality for the Liberal Party and for the Prime Minister for the next number of months. And it's going to be heavier and heavier for him to bear up under that.
And a new poll suggests that many Canadians would be willing to reconsider supporting the federal Liberals, but it might take a leadership change for them to do so. Of those who answered the Angus Reid poll, more than half said Justin Trudeau should step down as Liberal leader. But among decided Liberal voters and those who definitely would consider voting Liberal next election, there was less consensus on whether he should remain as leader. The poll found among those who absolutely won't consider voting Liberal, nearly 7 in 10 think Trudeau should be replaced.
Their committed base is pretty small. Their maybe base is pretty big. And why this matters is because it's among those maybe voters who are more likely to say, yeah, I think that maybe Mr. Trudeau has had his time and it's time for him to go. The challenge, however, is in the question of who should replace him, because the question is not Trudeau or no Trudeau, it's Trudeau or somebody else. And on that front, when we put potential successors in front of these possible Liberal voters, some of them are more likely to say, yeah, I would consider the party again, but not really in significant enough numbers.
Poll also found that among those who absolutely won't consider voting Liberal, as I mentioned, nearly 7 in 10 think Trudeau should step down and be replaced. Let's go to an election that actually just wrapped up. We're getting closer to learning who actually won last week's election in British Columbia. Tens of thousands of mail-in and absentee ballots are being counted, with election officials expected to count well into today. Now, there are also recounts in several ridings that are too close to call. Earlier today, the NDP was leading in 47 ridings, Conservatives in 45, Green Party 2. 47 seats are needed for a majority.
Our PC government is the only party, it's the only one that can make it happen for Nova Scotia.
Meanwhile, Nova Scotians will soon head to the polls after a snap election was called. Gunning for a second term, Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston made the call, which has been criticized by opposition parties. Houston had personally introduced legislation just a few years ago, setting the fixed election date for next July. Election day is now set for November 26th. And voters in Saskatchewan are voting today to elect a new provincial government. Polls suggest a tight race as the Saskatchewan party is seeking a 5th straight majority after 17 years in office, while the NDP is looking to take back government for the first time since 2007. Moving on now, Quarter Pounders back on McDonald's menus across the U.S. after testing ruled out beef patties as the source of a large E. coli outbreak. McDonald's notes that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration continues to believe that slivered onions from a single supplier are the only source of contamination. As of Friday, the outbreak had expanded to at least 75 people getting sick in 13 states, with one person dying. The affected products were only sold in specific states and never made their way to Canada. These did, though. A candy recall has been issued with just a couple days away from Halloween. The affected candies are from the brand Haribo and are labeled Tang-Fastics due to pieces of wood. That's why they're being recalled. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the gummy candies have a best before date of June 25th, 2025. And the number of people who rely on food banks in this country has hit a bad new milestone. Now, according to a new Food Banks Canada report, there were more than 2 million visits to food banks last March, nearly double the number of visits in March of 2019. That's also 6% higher than last year's record-breaking number. The organization says rapid inflation, housing costs, and insufficient social supports are driving poverty and food insecurity.
Across the country, we're seeing a huge need, but Ontario saw the biggest jump in the last 5 years, over 100% in need. And then Quebec was after that, seeing a large growth in the Atlantic provinces and as well as BC. And keep in mind, though, other provinces which didn't see as large an increase over the last year, that's less of an indication of less need and more of an indication that capacity has likely been reached. And that's a frightening prospect. So you can only give out as much food and you can only serve as many people as the capacity and the storage of food you have.
Daily Bread Food Bank CEO Neil Hetherington spoke to us about the report's findings.
It tells you that we have a broken social safety net. It tells you that there is something fundamentally wrong. It tells you that we are not building affordable housing. It tells you that the income supports that we have for those on disability are inadequate. And it tells you that there is a rising use of precarious employment. All of that is on the shoulders of the most vulnerable. All of that are on those children, the 2 in 5, and across the country, 1 in 3 being children who are having to make use of food banks is deplorable and not who we are as a nation.
Well, nearly a third of Canadian food banks report that they're running out of food. It is 5:49, 8 degrees, feeling like 4. You're watching Live at 5. The Canadian Medical Association wants employers to stop asking for sick notes. We'll explain just ahead. Welcome back. The Canadian Medical Association wants employers to stop asking for sick notes for short-term minor illnesses. The group says the policy creates millions of unnecessary health care interactions, bogging down the system. A recent survey suggests a third of working Canadians were asked by their employers to produce a sick note for a short absence at least once in the last year. CMA suggests that physicians should be spending time caring for patients who actually need medical care, not dealing with human resources issues. And the Ontario NDP is calling on the Ford government to provide universal access to mental health care. Leader Mart Stiles says that some kids spend up to 2 years on wait lists.
Kids cannot wait. Does the Premier agree that everyone deserves access to publicly funded, publicly delivered mental health services?
When we took office in 2018, Ontario's system of care for people with mental health and addictions challenges was broken because the previous government, supported by the NDP, never made it a priority. We, on the other hand, have developed and implemented the province's first long-term strategy for improving mental health and addictions care through the Roadmap to Wellness. And since then, we've increased annual funding for mental health and addictions by over $800 million. Introducing new programs like the Structured Psychotherapy Program, which provides free cognitive behavioral therapy to adults struggling with anxiety and depression. Mr. Speaker, we are the only government in this province's history that has ever treated mental health with the seriousness it deserves, and we are proud of our record of expanding services and helping vulnerable people get the care they need.
Supplementary question.
That's embarrassing. That's an embarrassing response. The number of children and youth on mental health wait lists has more than doubled under this government's time, from 12,000 to 30,000 children on those waiting lists. That is on this government.
Well, the province has committed to spending $3.8 billion over the next 10 years on mental health and addiction services. And the Ontario Liberals are calling on the province's Auditor General to investigate issues at Ontario Health at Home. The new provincial agency, which coordinates in-home and community-based care, has been plagued by supply issues.
Simple things like hydration and bandages, palliative medications. When they're not there, people suffer. So it's not only unacceptable, it's unfair and unjust what's happening here right now. And we need to get to the bottom of this. The Premier said he's going to get to the bottom of this. And there's a way for the Premier to do that. And he can do that by joining us and asking the Auditor General to do a special audit on what's happened here with Home Care Ontario.
Last week, Health Minister Sylvia Jones called supply shortages unacceptable. It is 5:55, 8 degrees. You're watching Live at 5. Top honors today from the province for CTV's Pat Foran. More on that honor coming up. Welcome back. Toronto Maple Leafs on the road tonight in Winnipeg, looking to snap their 3-game losing streak against a Jets team that hasn't lost at all yet.
Pasternak in front, Stolarz, another stop, scores!
Leafs are coming off that 4-3 overtime loss to Boston on Saturday. The Jets, meanwhile, looking to set a new franchise record with their 9th straight win. Puck drop, 7:30. And the Raps be a bit short-handed once they welcome in Jamal Murray and the Denver Nuggets tonight. Emmanuel quickly doubtful. Getting word right now that RJ Barrett should be good to go for game time. Toronto coming off that 112-101 loss to the Timberwolves on Saturday. That's how Grady Dick lead the way with 25 points. Tip-off at 7:30. You probably know his face. CTV reporter Pat Foran has been honored for his work as a consumer advocate.
Pat Foran's integrity has become synonymous with helping those who have no one else to turn to.
Foran was presented the Order of Ontario by Lieutenant Governor Edith Dumas during a ceremony at the Royal Ontario Museum this afternoon. As CTV's Consumer Alert reporter, Foran has been dispensing financial and consumer advice for 3 decades. His reporting on consumer fraud has helped thousands of people recover millions of dollars. It's 5:59, feeling like 4. You're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24. Thanks for joining us. CTV News at 6 is next.